Welcome to Teaching Articulations with Tag, Lesson 2, Starting Notes. Last time we discussed the definition of articulations, what it means and what it doesn't mean. We started with mispronunciation. When you mispronounce an articulation, you're playing it incorrectly. The definition is articulations are the subtle changes we make to the beginning, middle, and end of notes. We discussed how articulations can be confusing. We aren't going to go into that more today, but what we are going to do is find ways to start notes the same and consistently. How do you start notes consistently with articulations? That's what we're trying to cover today with the what, when, and how. Here are the articulations. We have a slur, tenuto, nothing that is an articulation. We have an accent, marcato, staccato, staccatissimo, and then there's variations on those articulations, all of them kind of a combination of some of these things. I have found that there are 5 ways to start notes between smooth and accented. So we're going to discuss those and how to play them. For today, our goal for the exercises you guys are learning is to have steady air and create air accent at the beginning of each note. That's how we create the accent using the subtle differences of air and tongue. How do we slur and make them smooth? Let's look at the sound wave. If you slur correctly, it should be smooth and connected. If you don't, there'll be disconnects, it won't be smooth. We don't articulate when we slur, it should just be steady air. Trombone players have to articulate or else they will gliss. Some common problems I found are kids, they don't have steady air or they're surging the beginning of notes. They're tonguing each note, not changing fingers or slides fast enough for slurs, or they're using incorrect fingerings for slurs. Clarinets and alto saxophones sometimes use alternate fingerings so they can slur well. If you play with steady air and you do those things, you should see the sound wave look kind of like mine right there. To play legato, remember we were trying to make a difference between the smoothest slur to the hardest accent. So legato, today we're going to use the accent no. Unless you're a clarinet or maybe an oboe, you're going to be just like the knights who say ni, e, e. You want that e at the end. The end for the no and the ni is nice and soft. There isn't an air accent. That helps us start the note without having the really big accent. Common problems I can see with legato are the same as slurs. Sometimes you can add no so your brain can pick up on those little slight crescendos so it's easier to play together. For tenuto accents, we're trying to make the sound wave look more like this. You can see the accent in the beginning and the decay. The accent or the syllable we're going to use is da. Exception, clarinets are going to use li. Oboe is also going to have a very light articulation. If you tongue as hard as the brass, it doesn't sound good. The most common problems I've found with tenuto accents is either you're too smooth or you're too accented. You're playing just like the slur or you're playing just like the marcato, and there's nothing in the middle. So we're trying to make those subtle differences so that we have 5 different accents. Make sure there's a slight accent at the beginning of the note. For accents, we need to articulate just a little harder, so we're going to use the syllable ta or d for clarinets. Our sound wave, you can see, even has a more drastic curve down. When we do accents, some of the common problems, kids that aren't using enough air pressure at the beginning of the note, behind the tongue. You need that air pressure, ta. That air pressure behind it will solve that problem. Also, I find glottal tonguing, meaning you're using the throat and saying ga instead of ta. Clarinets and oboes can be way too harsh if they use ta. So be really careful and use D, E instead. The last thing that I find a lot is not playing consistent. Some accents are way louder than others. Make sure They all are the same volume. They don't go higher and lower. You want them to stay at the same level all the way across. For marcato accents, we're going to want the heaviest of accents, but still maintain a good sound. We'll use the syllable ta, and you can see the sound wave, but you don't want it to distort the sound. So clarinets, you definitely want to use D. Common problems, brass, especially blasting. I was also heard it in flutes where they're tonguing way too hard and they change their tone. You might change your tone just slightly, but this takes practice to be consistent and not do too much. The other problem is not using enough air after accent for tone. They give us the accent, but they don't give us the tone. We can see all 5 sound waves here and see the differences between the slur and the marcato. What your job is going to do is be able to play each of these accents consistently. Practice them so when you see the sound waves, they look just like these ones. Our test is exactly the same as last week, except for we understand how to do it better. One of the things really going to help us is to remember these 2 things: steady air and create air accent at the beginning of each note. If you remember those 2 things, it will help you play each of these consistently. Next week, we're going to learn how to end the notes. But for right now, we're just going to start notes. Remember how you tested last week? Make sure to use some sort of device to record it so you can see the sound wave, because the sound wave is going to tell you more than just listening to it. Thanks and good luck on this week's test.